and we're a multi-disciplined organization. I happen to be an old pilot, not an old boat. Mr. Jim here, he's just a good group of people that like to get together and get different disciplinarians to talk. And so we have Dr. Rattan Lal going to speak on sequestration and green things and carbon dioxide, and maybe breaking it down into into formic acid. That's quite a few bumblebees stings, and see what he has to say about the future since the Industrial Revolution and how to stop some of this pollution.
Thank you, Steve. First of all, I do want to thank personally Steve. He has helped our group out on more than one occasion. We had even a guest who came from India today, one from Pakistan recently, Brazil and so forth. And many times we have approached him, and when those guys, even though they messed up things, he has been very kind and very helpful, and I really thank you for your helpfulness. I appreciate it. I am going to talk to you, if I had known what your membership was like, I pretty might have changed my presentation. But I'm going to talk something more generic way. But I heard you say astronauts are your members of your society. I once wrote an article with people from Kottman Hall, University of Science. I gave a similar seminar at Kottman Hall, and somebody asked me at the end, have you published what you presented? And no. How about writing a paper together with all of us? So in that paper there was a picture of a lake in Madagascar that was all shaping up, and picture was published in Science. It has rivers all shaping up. And Science wrote me a note saying, before you publish it, would you please tell us who owns the copyright of the picture? I said, well, I talked to people from Kottman Hall, they are the ones who included the picture. So I called up him. I said, Jay, whose picture is it? It's mine. You took this picture? Why did you have to take this picture? And that's what Jay Apt, astronaut, who was circling the Earth. And I did not know that I was a co-author with Jay Apt. He got the picture. So that tells you how ignorant I am of several things. I'm going to talk about a few things that are very generic. And I'm going to begin with explaining mankind and the environment. Mankind is on the horns of a dull lamp. For whether we like it or not, our collective way of life has become unsustainable, and we need to do something about it, and so. The choices we have already made about the way we lead our lives have been slowly eating away at the very support system that enables us to live and breathe. This cannot and should not go on. We need to make some tough decisions. We need to make them now, and we need to act on them as one, with total and undivided commitment today and in the future. Faced with the facts we cannot argue against, we need to consider our priorities and accept that we have to make certain sacrifices. We need to start putting life ahead of lifestyle. I think that's essentially the summary of what my talk. But I thought I'll give the conclusion before I tell you why I arrived at that conclusion. And this was published by the World Maritime Day report by the President. So to explain what I mean by here, I'm going to go to Climate Science 101. We got a greenhouse, and in this greenhouse, the sun ultraviolet radiation penetrates the glass in the greenhouse. The earth inside the greenhouse emits long-wave radiation, ultraviolet is short wave, which is emitted back into the space. And if the short wave and long-wave radiation are equal, then the temperature inside the enclosure stays the same. But if the long wave radiation which is escaping the enclosure is less than the short wave radiation, then the temperature inside the enclosure greenhouse will be more. And that's exactly what the glass does. The glass in the greenhouse absorbs some of the long wave radiation and reflects back inside the greenhouse. Consequently, the temperature inside the glass enclosure is more than the temperature outside. And we call this phenomenon the greenhouse effect. And that's what we call outside the enclosure of the earth, the same thing, greenhouse effect. The word greenhouse effect is misnomer. Because the glass enclosure that you're seeing is enclosed. But outside, the Earth's atmosphere is not enclosed. So I would prefer to call it the greenhouse temperature or the greenhouse phenomenon. So let's look at the same thing as the sun and the Earth. The Earth has an enclosure around it, an envelope, a blanket, you want to put it. So the solar radiation, again the ultraviolet, it enters into the atmospheric space, and the sun, the solar energy then reflected back into the space by the earth as the infrared, short wave and the long wave. Now the circle around the earth atmosphere has some gases, and those gases, as you notice the color changes because of those gases, they are able to absorb that infrared light just as the glass did in the greenhouse. And those gases have that ability to reflect some of that radiation back to the earth. So the earth warms up. If the earth did not have that atmosphere, the average temperature of the earth would have been minus 16 degrees Celsius if there were no gases. But the average temperature now, until the industrial revolution, is positive 15 degrees centigrade. So these gases have made a difference of 31 degrees Celsius. And these gases are HOH, H2O, water. OCO. Steve started talking about COO. I thought he was talking about the basic science, carbon dioxide. NON, the laughing gas, N2O. Why I have written them like this is the reason these molecules, HOH, OCO, NON, they are symmetric molecules, are C2H and C2H, C in the middle, 2H on both sides, C2H4. They are symmetric molecules. Now here is, let's look at that earth again. Here is that CO2. So the infrared radiation hits the molecules that bond, and this bond began to vibrate because of the energy that hit it. And because of that vibration, some of that radiation is reflected back. And it's only the symmetric molecule who have that ability to do it. If the molecule was OO, oxygen, it cannot do it. If the molecule was nitrogen, NN, it cannot do it. It's the symmetric molecule, it's like a balance that got hit. So that is the basic chemistry, and that's as far as I want to go into it. I do want you to understand the difference between the Earth and our sister planet. The Earth has nitrogen of 79%, oxygen about 21%, argon about 1%, but that 0.1%, the yellow part, is those trace gases, in which carbon dioxide is 0.04%. That's a water vapor, quite a lot. And that's also a greenhouse gas, but it doesn't make a difference. The reason it doesn't make a difference is because there's so much water vapor that we have no control on it. Nature has no control. Let's compare that with Mars. Mars has an atmosphere 95% carbon dioxide. 95%. Nitrogen is only 2.7%. Argon is 1.6%. But atmosphere of Mars is very thin. We have 14.7 pounds per square inch at the sea level here, and barometric pressure. Over there it's very thin. Therefore the greenhouse effect there is very negligible. So the temperature of the Mars is minus 67 degrees Fahrenheit compared to Earth's very nice 59 degrees. Previously I was giving you 50 degrees centigrade, now So let's compare what happened at Venus. Venus has carbon dioxide of 96.6%, but the atmospheric pressure is very dense. It's very higher pressure than 14.7 pounds. And therefore the temperature at Venus is at 890 degrees Fahrenheit. Quite a bounding place. So we got Earth 59, we got 67. So I think if you can think about where the Hammond is, I know where the Hammond should be. I definitely don't want to go to Mars or Venus, Venus, what it is. So I think this is it. This is all the Hammond that we got. And that's a very important concept. We should not mess up with the Hammond that we got, because our sister planets are certainly not nearby. Now, what happened about 15,000 years ago? The place where we are seated here in Kottman Hall, this place had about a mile thick ice, called Labrador Ice Sheet. About a mile thick. If you go to southern Ohio, around Piketon, Circleville area, you see some sandstone here, sandy hill, not sandstone, sandy. And these are the holes in the ice from where the water and sand dropped at the ice was melting away. Sometimes you see the moraine ridges also that you will find. So what happened about 15,000 years ago, the temperature before that was very upside down, undulating, unstable, going up and down and so forth. So about 10,000, 11,000 BC, that ice began to recede. All of a sudden, the temperature went up by 5 degrees Celsius. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere went from 180 parts per million to 280 parts per million. And the temperature became stable. See that it became almost a constant line. Annual average temperature. These are 10-year average temperatures. Became very constant. So I call that, many people call long summer. We had a long summer. And as the summertime began about 10,000 years ago, that thing made agriculture possible as we know it. Before that, the temperature was so unstable, the carbon dioxide concentration was so low, growing crop was not possible, agriculture became possible. And because agriculture became possible, it was about 8,000, 10,000 BC, we do not know exactly how much, but around that 10,000, 12,000 years ago, that's when the agriculture began. And then, as you know, in 1750, the Industrial Revolution began. A sun scientist, especially the Nobel laureate Paul Crutzen from Germany, we have worked with him, we have met him. He called that 1750 Anthropocene, the human era. The human force became, since 1750, according to him, so great in its impact on the earth that it was as big a force as geological forces. I think, as an agriculturist, he's an atmospheric chemist, I'm an agriculturist, I think Anthropocene began when the agriculture began. But that's when we began to do the deforestation, biomass burning, started cultivating, agriculture, corn, wheat, whatever, we started barley, einkorn, we started doing at that time. That's when the human era began. About Anthropocene, about 10,000, 8,000 years ago. So as a result of that, many things happened. The human became a very big force. But in between we had a little ice age. And what happened in the little ice age, the sun is able to get quiet during the sunspot minima. When the sunspot is minima, it's a very quiet. And when the sunspot gets very high, the activity increases, then we have a change in temperature. So the sunspot activity was very low between 1450 and 1750. That's when the little ice age happened. According to some people, they think that right now should have been another little ice age as now. But the human activity has averted that ice age. And that's what so-called global warming is. One understand the difference between two. Now, one thing as a result of agriculture happened, and this is to me a very important historical thing. In about 9 to 14,000 years ago, agriculture in the Fertile Crescent, you know where that is, Iraq, where the troubles are, Egypt and so forth. Einkorn, hammer, barley, pea, vetch, lentil, they were domesticated. In northern China, about 9,000 years ago, rice was domesticated. In Papua New Guinea, many people do not think that. Sugarcane and root crops, cassava, sweet cattle, game. They were domesticated in central Mexico. Horseback and miners. They domesticated maize, squash, gourd, bean, and cocoa. I think you know what cocoa is. Indus Valley. About 7,500 to 11,000 years ago, wheat, barley, hoba were domesticated. Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, some of those civilizations. West Africa, about 4,500 years ago. Yam and cassava buds. This yam is not sweet cattle. The yam is Dioscorea rotundata, different species. Sweet cattle is the Palmia batata. Horn of Africa, as Somalia, Ethiopia, 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. Coffee, cucumber tree, Jehovah, tap. I don't know if you go to an Ethiopian restaurant, that very thin bread. I think they call it tanjira or whatever. Here is something before 1491. The Cherokees, 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, were cultivating cranberry, chenpa marsh, elder, maple sugar, tobacco, squash, sunflower, knotweed, little barley, natives. That's the Cherokees, not the Cherokee later. Western North America, that is pure blood vendors. 6,000 years ago, they were cultivating almonds and pine nuts. That were those crops. And of course, in South America, the Incas were cultivating at that time potato, bean, and cocoa. When Vasco da Gama came, there are about 4 to 6 million people living in the Amazon area, in the Amazon forest. Their buildings and civilization were not like this. They were there. What happened when the agriculture began? The human spiral began. This is a real picture. I won't tell you where it comes from because it's too close to my home. You don't see the fifth baby there. You can't see it. In 1800, we had 1 billion people. In 2013, we have 7.5. This is the widest population came up last month. In 2050, it will be 9.6 billion. 3.5 billion more than today. 37 years from now. And by 2100, it will be 11 billion. 3.7 billion, almost 4 billion people from now in the next 37 years on this planet. 3.7 more guests coming to dinner tonight, 37 years from now. That's a major, and it's an impact of that agriculture. That's why I call that era when the agriculture began Anthropocene, human era. Not what Paul Crusoe says, it's different. And what do humans do? Their impact on the planet Earth is given by formula of PAT. I equal to PAT. Population multiplied by the affluence, the standard of living of the people with which they live, multiplied by the technology that they use. That's the impact. One of the authors of this was Paul Ehrlich, I don't know many of you know, and John Holdren. Anybody know who John Holdren is? Science advisor currently of President Obama. Because the author of that paper came up in 81, I think, in Science. That impact is still there. John Holdren, many of you know the Paul Ehrlich and his wife, the book, the Operation Bomb. I think he stuck there. Last year we were in Jerusalem, and he stuck at the population bomb, but I think the world has moved on. One impact that happened was the deforestation. 8000 BC, when the Anthropocene began, we had 16 billion acres of forest. Now, less than 10 billion. 6 billion acres of forest is gone. This is not savanna and prairie. This is forest alone. That's a major impact. Cropland, 3.5 billion acres on a global scale. Grazing land, 5.5 billion acres, and forest land. In 1700, 95% of the Earth's ice-free land was wild land. In 2000, 45% of the Earth's wild land is wild land. So, 33% of all the primary productivity, photosynthesis, is consumed by humans. 33%. And how many species we have on the planet Earth? Those of you who are Buddhist and Hindus, they know it's 8.4 million. Science has just announced 8.7. 8.7. One species alone takes more than 33%. Therefore, we are greedy. We have an appetite which just is very difficult to quench. This picture is from God's own corn country. Can you guess which one is that? Iowa. On the way from Des Moines to Ames. Because the price of corn at the moment is $7 bushels. Therefore, that $7 is driving, cultivate whatever you can and as much as you can. Don't worry about what happens to land. As a result of that process of erosion by which the soil is moved over the landscape and eventually taken to Gulf of Mexico through Mississippi, 1.1, that's a gigaton, and a billion tons of carbon in the soil being transported by the rivers goes up in the atmosphere, which is not fossil fuel combustion. That's the cultivation of land and the erosion that we cause with it. So erosion has more than just the ugly face that you see. I mentioned we have 3.7 billion coming as guests of the planet Earth. How much land area do you need to provide accommodation to them? Create shopping malls for them, create highways for them. Let's look at the calculation. Again, this picture comes right very close to my home where I came from. And bicycle and this one. State of Punjab. Urbanization and land, let's see how it looks. It takes 40,000 hectares. Hectare is 2.5 acres. 100,000 acres. To provide accommodation and infrastructure to 1 million people. And that's not accommodation, that means shopping mall, the airport, the roads, the railways, high school and everything else. We get 75 million people new faces every year. New mouths every year, 75. So 75 million times 40,000 is 3 million hectares. It is 3 million hectares of good land that goes under urban land and building and so forth. So eventually we are going to have a lot of people in megacity. Right now 50%, about 52% of the people live in cities. And there are 236 cities in 2012 which are greater than 10 million people. Rio and Mexico and Calcutta and Bombay, 30, 40 million each daily. A city of 10 million people requires 6,000 tons of food every day. That in itself is not a problem. The 6,000 tons of food carries with it nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and everything else. Traditionally, that got back on the land. And now it does not. It ends up into the sewer system. The sewer system that we have designed by Roman, I'm glad that they did, is faulty. Why it's faulty? Because the phosphorus is a limiting element. You cannot manufacture it. Nitrogen you can. Potassium you can use plenty. Phosphorus you cannot. Phosphorus is a very limited resource. So somewhere phosphorus has to really be taken care of. So if I were to tell what happened from 8000 BC to 1750, remember that era long summer began until 1750, deforestation and agriculture take from the trees and land and wetland and peat soil and prairie 320 gigaton of carbon by deforestation, by drainage, by cultivation. How much did we take from fossil fuel combustion from 1750? Before that there was no fossil fuel. 292 from 1750 to 2000. Since then, land use change has taken another 156. Out of that soil, that beautiful black soil which is like potting clay that we buy from Lawson, out of that 156, 78 approximately is soil. These are estimates. Fossil fuel, we know from the barrels how many, soil you cannot count. So these are estimates. What is going to happen between now and 2030? Another fossil fuel will add another 190 and land use will take another 30. So if you combine between beginning of the agriculture to very soon, because it's right now 12% of the total emission that comes globally comes from agriculture. Okay, we call ourselves, you remember Egyptian and Indus Valley civilization, we call them hydric civilization. Hydric because they were based on water. Then we had bronze civilization. Then we had copper civilization. We had stone civilization. The stone civilization did not end because we ran out of stone. And I think carbon civilization, which is now, really will also hopefully end before the fossil fuel will run out. Because otherwise we really mess up the global carbon cycle. The carbon civilizations in 1860, I'm giving you different kind of data, 132 million tons of coal was produced in 1860. 132 million tons. In 2010, we produced 3.7 billion tons of coal. That's the carbon civilization. Oil consumption every day is 87.5 million barrels per day. It's not the United States, it's the world. Every person in this room and everywhere else, average, we are really addicted to gasoline. We consume 0.6 gallons per day, our lifestyle. Transport, heating, cooling, driving, eating food, making food, cooking food. 0.6 gallons. That's a real addiction. That's why we are a carbon civilization. In addition to that, gas use. We have 8.1 billion cubic meter per day of gas. You might be wondering what these numbers mean. Drinking water, average 0.6 gallon per day. With my graduate student, Chris is here, I don't know who else is here, they do not like the drinking water part. We are higher, 0.1 gallon per day. So, Chris, you got a long way to catch up. It's got to be good water. And put things in perspective. 0.6 gallon per day of gasoline and 0.6 gallon per day of water. That's where we are in terms of the comparison. So what is happening since 1750 to global warming? I'm going to go back to the diagram that I gave you before. This is where the atmosphere was. We got 280 parts per million. The land was reflecting a little bit of that red arrow back to the earth. The temperature at that time was 59 degrees Fahrenheit in 1750. In 2010, the atmospheric concentration is 400 parts per million. In fact, now in May, it became 400. 13th of May, it became 400 parts per million. This slide is a little bit old. The temperature now is 60. We have gained since 1750 1 degree Fahrenheit, 1.1 degree Fahrenheit. What's going to happen in 2100? 2100, the temperature, the carbon dioxide is going to be 525 parts per million. You see the red arrow is increasing because more and more radiation is going to be reflected back. The temperature is going to become 64.5. I'm waiting to be alive by that time so I can grow some rice paddies and bananas and sugar, citrus. So, if the CO2 concentration is 450, the temperature will go up by 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's 525, it will go up by 5.4. If it's 800, the temperature will go up by 90 degrees. These are the estimates. By the way, many people think these estimates are calculated now. There was a fellow from Sweden, Uppsala to be exact, his name was Arrhenius. He made these calculations in 1896. It took him several years to do it, but his estimates are almost the same except the variability precision, plus minus. But Arrhenius in 1896 was the first one to do this calculation, so not today. So the question really is, are humans innocent victims in this global climate change and land degradation syndrome? Or are they cause of the problem? The answer to that question decides what action we take. That's very important. Who are we culprit? Are we, any policy intervention depends on the objective answer to that question. If we realize that each one of us is a cause of the problem, and remember I said, lifestyle is not as important as life is. And if we accept the fact that we are the culprit, then we have to do something about our lifestyle. And it's like denial. I'm one of those who deny. Anytime my doctor tells me you have something wrong, I'm all no way. So I deal with such a drastic climate change since 10 to 12 million millennia ago, 1,000 years ago, millennia. That's, remember I said when Kottman Hall was under a wild thick ice sheet. Now the human population of 7.2 billion, projected to be 10 billion or 11 billion soon, have to deal with it and increasingly so in the future. Yet there is no consensus such as Rio Plus 20. I don't know whether you know what Rio Plus 20 is. All our leaders went there. And everybody said, no way, because their time horizon is 4 years. How can you make that decision over there? Yes, we will do. We are culprit, we'll take an action, but then after 4 years, the population will get out. I'm not into it. Somebody who has to make a decision has to have a longer time commitment than just 4 years. And I think we, people in this room and elsewhere outside the Rio Plus 20, do have that. Over there, whether it's president of country A, president of country B, I prepared a document last year, which was called Rio Plus 20 Zero Net Land Degradation. Nobody paid attention to it. They have done that. Durban was the same thing, Kottman Hall was the same thing. So, green arrow should have been by 2015, that population of how many people it doesn't come up to half. The real part that happened from that time onward was this. So right now, last year we had 10, 20 million people, more than a billion. That's what that big arrow. Currently, 825 million people who do not get enough food to eat. When I say enough food, that means 2,000 calories per day. And that still remains a problem that we have to address. Additional global demand by 2050 will be 1 billion ton more cereals and 200 more million tons of meat by 2050. And to produce that meat, the future feed demand right now, with 7 billion people, we cultivate the area of land equal to that of South America. And in 2050, we will need South America plus Brazil to cultivate. And that plus Brazil part, kind of abusing the laws. What implication will that have? Peace and stability, I cannot have. I think I'm coming to the end. Nothing comes from nothing. Crop residue back on the land. So that picture that you saw from agriculture, I want agriculture. This picture, by the way, no tell, is my own experiment done in Nigeria. This picture was taken in 1971. And the crop here is not soybean, it's cowpeas. Cowpeas beans, this bean that we make, beans and rice, remember that. My only, and I published this in 71, my only distinction is that nobody uses this technique. And that is what they need the most. And the reason why nobody uses it, because that crop residue, which I tell them leave it on the ground, it has so many good uses. Fences, building house, feeding to the cattle, cooking. So when I used to tell them leave it on the ground, they say you've gone crazy. So same thing in India. I've taken this picture, and the reason is, let's talk about India for example, or Pakistan, the same thing. The wheat straw, the price of wheat straw is 70% the price of grains. How are you going to tell those farmers to leave it? There's only one way. That the people who go to Rio Plus 20, they say, we will compensate you for doing that. If not, they have a better way of doing it. They have other people. So, no till 1.3 to 1.5 billion smallholders who cannot afford to do it. They are the ones producing. Now, in the US, if you did that, croplands can sequester every year. There was a farmer from California during Bill Clinton there. I remember you were telling us about Bill. His name was Richard Raman, Californian farmer. He was the Undersecretary of Agriculture there. And in '95, Richard Raman were called 4 of us. In addition to me, it was Ron Follett from Colorado State, John Kimball from Lincoln, Nebraska, Bobby Stewart from Texas A&M. He said, hey guys, before my team goes to Kyoto, I want you to tell me how much carbon can we put back into our land. About 150 to 400 million tons. We can put back in the land every year until the land capacity of the US is full. And how much did we empty from the US? 5 million tons. How long it will take? About 50 years. So we have a low-hanging fruit because putting carbon back has many, many benefits than the so-called clean coal technology, which is injecting, which is, by the way, the price of the clean coal technology is $1 a ton of CO2. These are published last year in May. Residue-produced biofuel. I want to show you this picture again, going back to Nigeria. I started this experiment in 1969. 2 plots flat. One was what farmers did, take away the crop residue, that's the front plot. The other was everything else is same to keep the crop residue back in the ground. This picture was taken in 87 when I left. 17 years after. I have the same experiment at Coshocton, Ohio. Last year, the one where the residue was left, you remember last year, dry and hot, 60% more corn. That day I called Howard Buffett. I don't know whether you know who Howard Buffett is. Big time farmer. I won't tell you what his father does. It's a big time farmer. He was harvesting. He said, you know what? I'm harvesting 60 bushel today, where it used to be 200 bushel. That's what happened now. But with the residue, you create a resilience against the climatic events. But different, none. I put away on the other side, because that'd be food for them. You take away that. And so my slogan is, there is no such thing as a free biofuel from crop residues. It's a great price. That's the price. We made from water every living thing, around 25, 54. Do not overuse water even if you are on a running river. Khalid Gibran. Anybody know who he was? We always think you are somebody stranger. He was a Lebanese American. And he wrote a book which is, I love that book, it's called Rubaiyat of Khalid Gibran. Does anybody know that book? Rubaiyat means poem. Good. Who else was a Lebanese who was a very good musician? Liberace. Remember? The piano. Trees are poems that earth writes upon the sky. We fell them down and turned them into paper so that we made a card of emptiness. I want to share with you Gandhi's, and at the end I'll tell you a story. I presented the same talk in Geneva about 2 weeks ago. And we had about 400. And at the end of the talk, I was introduced by Ambassador Mark Smith, Ambassador of Germany to the United Nations. And at the end of the talk, he said, I wanted to meet somebody. That was a coffee break. I'll tell you what somebody was. Anyway, Gandhi. Anybody see a newspaper today in which there were 20 people with their photo and how many billions of dollars they have in Swiss banks? I won't give the name because some people may feel offended by it. Saddam Hussein was one. The same pleasure without gathering in Geneva, that if Gandhi was alive and he were to see the statistic, would he have expanded his list? And if he did expand his list, what would he have added? I think your guess is definitely much better than mine. I think he would have added technology without. I think he would have added education without benefit. We must teach our students how to address the problems that the society is facing now and in the future. And I really think he would have said humanity without conscience. And now when I finished this, the chairman of the conference told me that come and meet somebody. It was the grandson of Gandhi. And I did meet him. Sent a picture. You guys have to go, I know, but I'll be glad for a few more minutes.